Hi everybody, I'm Becky Naderman, author and conversation facilitator. And today I'm facilitating conversation about our human response to threats and perceived threats. So I want you to think about a time when you had a perceived threat or something threatening happened to you, and think about how you responded. And I have an example for you from my own life. So one of the things that you might not know about me is that I'm afraid of dogs, and for a pretty good reason. I work in multiple homes in a day, and over the course of the last 2 decades, I've been bitten a handful of times by dogs. And so when I encounter a dog, I'm fearful. And if that dog starts barking or charging at me, my response is something that's very automatic. Oftentimes it's created situations that are embarrassing for me, situations that were out of my control. One such time was a time when a very large dog took an aggressive stance, and I ran screaming behind the owner, who happened to be a very frail 90-year-old lady who would not be able to protect me or defend me. Another time, recently, I went to a home and a very small dog started coming out the door at me, and it was charging at me and barking furiously. And I started to slowly back up, and then I froze. And the owner was telling me, come in, it'll be fine. Just come in through the door. Just keep walking right through, ignore the dog. But I couldn't. I froze in my tracks. There was nothing I could do. This is a normal response for us when we perceive a threat. Our human brain goes into this automatic response mode. And there's 3 ways that we respond to perceived threats. You probably are familiar with fight and flight, but there's a third one, it's freeze. So fight is our need to protect ourselves. Maybe it's blocking a blow or throwing a punch, or maybe it's using our words in a loud voice of shouting or aggressive verbal manner. Maybe it's flight. We get the heck out of there. And maybe it's we freeze in our tracks like I did with the dog. So as we continue to deal with racial inequities in our country and civil unrest, and we have yet another shooting in Kenosha, Wisconsin, I start to see comments that I've seen before and heard before, and it reminds me of this response that we have, this automatic response. So the comments that I've seen and heard before when these police brutality situations happen and shootings, I hear people say, if he would have just stopped, if he would have just done what the officer asked him to do, he would still be alive, or would have ended differently. And while these statements can seem like something that causes us to stop and think maybe that's true, I find that sometimes these conversations can be somewhat confusing. It causes me to start to look at things in a way where now it's a blaming the victim situation, which we do that too as human beings, not just in these situations, but other situations as well. But I think it's important for us to apply the psychology of how human beings respond to perceived threats. Flight, fight, or freeze. We all have that built into our psyche. And when we're experiencing trauma, those are the ways that we respond. When we have a perceived threat, especially if it's a threat that has been presented more than one time to us, those responses are even more ingrained. And so, if you are a Black man living in America, certainly an encounter with police is a perceived threat for most, if not all. After the videos that we've seen over the last several years, and especially this summer, we have this awareness of why there would be this automatic response of fight, flight, or freeze. And when I look at the situation and I respond to that comment of, if he would have just done what they were asking him to do, and I apply the psychology that you and I and every other human being is built with, it can allow me to move to a place not of judgment, but move to a place of empathy, a place of love, a place where I can move forward to really be able to just have compassion for the situation without blaming. You know, we are called to love our neighbor as ourselves. We are called not to judge. Sometimes those things can be really hard for us to do. But love is absolutely our path to healing. Might not be easy. Might be something that requires our attention over and over again. Might be something that we have to continue to cultivate and continue to nourish. But that is the way to healing for us. And so let us today apply the psychology. Let us put ourselves in the shoes of another person. Let us not judge. And let us lead with love.